My name is Serena Thorne, and the betrayal that unmade my world didn't happen in a shadowy alley or a hostile boardroom, but in the sun-drenched, minimalist perfection of our shared Silicon Valley startup office on a Tuesday afternoon, the air smelling of expensive coffee and venture capital dreams. The moment my identical twin sister, Savannah, the other half of my soul since birth, the person whose face was my mirror, looked me dead in the eye and told a lie so profound it rewrote our entire history. We were celebrating, or so I thought, the seed funding for our fintech app, Veritas, a tool for financial transparency I had conceived and coded through Nundi, our weeks, the algorithm's elegant logic born from my insomnia, my passion for democratizing finance, my belief that our shared name, Thorne, could stand for integrity. The check, for $2.5 million, was made out to Savannah Thorne, our lead negotiator and face of the company, a decision we'd made for simplicity. A trust so absolute it never required a second thought. As I reached for the champagne flute, giddy with exhaustion and triumph, she placed a perfectly manicured hand over mine, her smile not one of shared joy, but of cool, surgical finality. "Serena, sweetie," she said, her voice a melodic poison I'd never heard before. "We need to talk about your role. The investors, they see the vision, but they're concerned about stability. Your episodes. The sleeplessness, the obsessive tweaking. It reads as erratic. For the good of Veritas, for its future, I've had to make a difficult decision. The company, the IP, the funding, it needs to be under one stable leadership. My leadership. I've filed the paperwork. Veritas, and all its assets, are mine." I stared, my brain refusing to parse the words, thinking it was a twisted joke, but her eyes were flat, calculated, the eyes of a stranger. "But, my code, our name," I stammered, the world tilting. She leaned in, her whisper for me alone, amidst the clinking glasses and investor chatter. "My name, Serena. You've always been the ghost in the machine, the brilliant, messy backbone. But the world sees me. They trust me. And that check," she gestured lightly to the framed instrument on the wall, "it's for Savannah Thorne, which is me. You have no legal claim. You signed the early IP agreements in your enthusiastic state. It's all perfectly clean. For old time's sake, here's a parting gift." She slid a pre-written check across the glass desk for $50,000, a pittance, an insult, a severance for my own life's work. The humiliation was a vacuum, sucking the air from the room. I saw our childhood, sharing secrets in the dark, promising to always have each other's backs. I saw the years at MIT, passing notes in lectures, dreaming this very dream together. I saw the trust, the absolute, unquestioning faith that had been my cardinal error. The tears that welled weren't just of shock, but of a profound, soul-rending grief for the death of the person I loved most. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the champagne. In that cataclysmic silence, as my past and future were stolen with a signature and a smile, something in me detonated, and then instantly froze into a new, crystalline form. I took the insulting check, not in acceptance, but as evidence, my fingers cold and steady. And I walked out of the office I had built, past the investors who now pitied or ignored me, into the San Jose's afternoon, and I made a vow, not of fiery retribution, but of a patient, meticulous reclamation. I would take back what was mine, not through violence or screaming matches, but through a superior understanding of the very systems she thought she'd mastered. And I would do it so completely, so legally, and so quietly that her victory would become the foundation of her ruin. The aftermath was a free fall into a chilling new reality. I was locked out of the company servers, my email disabled, our apartment lease effectively void. The $50,000, after taxes, was a lifeline that felt like a leash. The tech community, smelling blood in the water, subtly ostracized me. Savannah's narrative of the unstable genius sister, had spread with viral efficiency. I rented a tiny, furnished studio in a less glossy part of Oakland, its windows overlooking a gray courtyard, a stark contrast to our sleek mountain view loft. The silence was deafening, a physical presence. The hunger wasn't just for food, though I lived on cheap noodles and coffee, watching my bank account dwindle, but for purpose, for the intellectual fury of creation that had been stolen. The self-doubt was a gnawing beast. Had I been erratic? Had my passion been a liability? Was I, in fact, just the ghost in the machine? I spent days in a numb haze, scrolling through news articles celebrating Savannah Thorne, the wonderkind founder of Veritas. Seeing my face, our face, smiling back at me from tech journals, claiming my ideas, my life's work. The tears came then, not the furious sobs of anger, but the silent, endless drip of betrayed love, mourning the twin who had died in that office, leaving a cunning imposter in her place. But within that despair, the cold, logical part of my mind, the coder's mind, began to boot up. Revenge would not be an emotional outburst. It would be an algorithm. A complex, multi-variable equation with one solution: total restitution. I needed a new battlefield, one she wouldn't think to look for me on. Finance had been my passion, it would now be my weapon. I sold the few designer items I had left from our shared life, hoarded the cash, and used the last of my sanity to enroll in the most grueling, respected certification course in the world, the Chartered Financial Analyst Program. It was a 3-level gauntlet of quantitative methods, ethics, portfolio management, and advanced financial analysis, a language of true power on Wall Street and in corporate boardrooms. My studio became a cave of textbooks and whiteboards. I existed on caffeine and obsession, studying 18 hours a day, the complex formulas and ethical frameworks a sanctuary from my pain, each mastered concept a brick in my new intellectual fortress. I took a part-time, graveyard shift data analyst job for a bland insurance company in Fremont. The work mind, numbing, but providing just enough to pay rent and exam fees. My world reduced to the blue glow of spreadsheets by night, and the dense prose of financial texts by day. Passing the CFA level I exam was a flicker of light in the gloom, proof my mind still worked. I used that credential to claw my way into a slightly better role as a junior financial analyst for a mid-sized asset management firm in San Francisco, a world away from the sexy tech scene Savannah dominated. Here, I was invisible, a number cruncher in a cubicle, and I cherished the anonymity. I performed my duties with robotic precision, but my real work happened after hours. I began to quietly, legally, obsessively study Veritas. I analyzed its funding rounds, its burn rate, its user acquisition costs, using public data and the sharpened skills of my new profession. I saw the flaws in her business model, the reliance on hype over substance, the aggressive monetization strategies that compromised the transparency ethos I'd coded into its heart. I saw the investors she'd attracted: flashy, impatient VC firms looking for a quick flip, not the patient, transformative tool I'd envisioned. I began to model her downfall. It wouldn't come from a direct attack, but from the market itself, gently nudged. While she gave interviews and wore my face on magazine covers, I was becoming a ghost in a different machine, the global financial system. I networked with a quiet, intense focus at CFA Society events, not seeking friends, but allies: older, disillusioned quants, forensic accountants, compliance officers who valued substance over spectacle. I spoke little of my past, building a reputation solely as a frighteningly brilliant and discreet analyst, with a preternatural sense for risk and systemic weakness. After 2 years of this silent, parallel life, I passed the final CFA Level 3 exam, earning the right to use the 3 letters after my name: Serena Thorne, CFA. It was a uniform of credibility no tech hype could match in the circles that truly controlled capital. With this, I was headhunted by a prestigious, notoriously ruthless hedge fund in Manhattan, Diaries Capital. Known for its activist short selling and forensic deep dives into overvalued companies. I moved to New York, to a small, efficient apartment in the financial district, the canyons of steel and glass my new cathedral. At Athard, I was finally home. My boss, a sharp, cynical woman named Victoria Clark, saw in me a kindred spirit of cold analysis. I was assigned to find structural cracks in narrative-driven companies. I didn't have to look far. I proposed Veritas as a target. I presented my analysis not with personal venom, but with chilling, data-driven objectivity, the inflated user metrics, the unsustainable customer acquisition costs, the regulatory time bombs in its data aggregation methods, the fundamental disconnect between its marketed ethics and its actual revenue model. I showed how its entire valuation was a house of cards built on Savannah's charismatic narrative and the tech bubble's froth. Victoria greenlit the deep dive. With the vast resources of Athard behind me, I orchestrated the most comprehensive, legal investigation of my own creation. We hired private investigators to scrutinize Veritas's leadership, commissioned technical experts to tear apart the app's security, and partnered with data firms to validate our thesis on its crumbling user engagement. It was a forensic autopsy of my own stolen child, and I conducted it with the sterile precision of a surgeon. We built a massive short position in Veritas's privately traded shares through complex derivatives, betting millions that its value would collapse. Then, we published our report, Veritas, the Transparency Illusion. It was a masterpiece of financial destruction, over 200 pages of irrefutable, ethically sourced evidence, written in dry, devastating prose. It hit the financial wires at 6 a.m. on a Monday. By 9:30 a.m., Veritas's investors were in a panic. By noon, the SEC had announced an informal inquiry into its metrics reporting. By the close of the week, its valuation had been cut in half. Savannah, in crisis PR mode, gave a tearful interview claiming she was the victim of a predatory short seller attack and a former associate's bitterness. She didn't name me, but the implication was clear. It was time for Phase 2 reclamation. I didn't gloat. I didn't reach out. I let the pressure build. As Veritas bled cash and credibility, I used a portion of the profits from Athord's massively successful short position, profits I had earned a significant bonus from, to quietly, through a network of blind trusts and legal proxies, begin purchasing Veritas's distressed debt at pennies on the dollar. I became its largest creditor without her knowledge. Meanwhile, I had been working on my own project, in secret, for years. I called it Aletheia. It was everything Veritas was supposed to be, genuinely transparent, user-owned, built on an immutable audit trail, its code a love letter to my original vision, refined and hardened by my financial expertise. I filed the patents myself, under a new corporate entity, with airtight IP protection. When Veritas was on the brink of insolvency, its board desperate, I made my move. Not as Serena Thorne, the betrayed sister, but as the representative of Athord Capital, an associated creditor consortium. We called an emergency debt restructuring meeting. I walked into the conference room of a sleek San Francisco law firm, dressed in a severe, powerful black suit, my CFA pin on my lapel, a team of Aethelred's toughest lawyers flanking me. Savannah was there, across the polished table, pale and strained, trying to project defiant confidence. She didn't recognize me at first, my demeanor so altered, my presence one of pure, formidable authority. Then our eyes met. The color drained from her face completely. It was the look of someone seeing a ghost armed with contracts and collateral. You, she breathed. I didn't smile. I placed my briefcase on the table. Ms. Thorne, on behalf of the majority debt holders, we are presenting terms for the acquisition of Veritas's remaining assets, and IP in lieu of bankruptcy. The terms were brutal, designed not for profit, but for justice. They stipulated a full transfer of all Veritas technology, patents, and brand assets to a new entity for a nominal sum. They included a non-disparagement clause and a public confession, drafted by my lawyers, regarding the origins of the core algorithm. And they included a personal, legally binding requirement for Savannah Thorne to sign over the trademark for the name, Veritas, and the related domain holdings. She would be left with nothing but the hollow shell of a company and a mountain of legal bills. Her lawyers advised her to take the deal. Bankruptcy would be worse. She had to sign. She had to watch as everything she stole was legally, calmly, irrevocably taken back. As her pen scratched on the final page, her hand trembling violently, a single tear of furious, helpless shame tracked through her foundation. It wasn't the breakdown of a mother seeing a uniform. It was the implosion of a thief facing the immutable balance sheet of her crimes. I stood, gathered my papers, and looked at my twin one last time. "The check you gave me," I said, my voice quiet and final in the hushed room. "I reinvested it. This is the return." I walked out, the deed done. The revenge was complete, quiet, and buried in the fine print of financial law. Later, I merged the salvaged Veritas tech with my Aletheia platform, creating something truly revolutionary. The story that emerged in the press was a business fable, the brilliant, wronged founder who outsmarted her betrayer in the market, a tale of financial and intellectual justice. I never spoke to Savannah again. The final, powerful message of my story is not about the thrill of the takedown, but about the supreme power of channeling betrayal into mastery, of using the very tools of your enemy's trade to dismantle their world, and understanding that the most complete revenge is not destruction, but reclamation, taking back your name, your work, and your future, and building them anew, stronger and more unassailable than before, on the solid ground of your own earned skill and silent, unstoppable perseverance.